I am Anna. I'm a second year PhD candidate at Cardiff University in ancient history. And I am currently working on women and leadership in Ctesias Persica from a feminist perspective, using the feminist studies to gather a new view of this work and these women.
Thank you so much, Anna, for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Your work sounds very, very interesting because it's a really nice fresh take in what I can imagine is quite a male-dominated field.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you very much.
no, that's great. And you've already mentioned your research interests, but perhaps we could talk a little bit about what your PhD is about.
Hmm. So my PhD is about women, royal women during Achaemenid Persia, focusing on Ctesias Persica, his work, and how he describes these women, how the power dynamics within the court worked, and how they exercise power because it is commonly it commonly goes unacknowledged how they could have their own power and their own ways of having influence and on different matters of this massive empire that was Achaemenid Persia.
Excuse my ignorance because I don't know much about women, the role of women in Achaemenid Persia, but would these be wives and daughters or courtiers?
Yes, all of them, all the members of the family. Um, it focuses, it goes within the idea of harem, although this term is widely debated whether because of its
Of course.
connotations to the view of the more occidental view of the harem. Um, it was very diverse, very interesting. The power dynamics within it were really interesting, and it was sisters, mothers of kings, and all the royal members. But also, we have courtesans and we have dancers that were women, and also transmitted information that is quite interesting in order to see the views that for the Persians and the Achaemenids had of themselves. So yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. And it's incredible because we literally don't know that much. We know the great male leaders, but not so much the role the women played. So thank you for conducting this research. In terms of your sources, I mean, you focus on this one piece of text, is that right? But
Mhm.
do you have other sources like rock reliefs and that sort of thing? Do they tell you
Yes,
anything?
at the moment I'm focusing on the text, on the fragments, and then I will compare what it is said in these fragments that might be true or might be not, with reliefs, archaeological evidence, and anything that we can use to contrast this information. But it's also really interesting in order to see how they perceive themselves. And even if Ctesias was Greek, he also interacted very much with women because he was the doctor of the mother of the king, and he was in close contact also with these women, besides of the king and the males of the court. Um, so that information that he can gather from these groups is really interesting to see this perception that they had of themselves, but also it's interesting to see and to compare with more historical, let's say, evidence. So yeah.
Wow, great work. And what led you to pursue this topic for your PhD?
My road to arrive to here it's quite complicated. I started working with Xenophon with the Anabasis, that mainly relates this story of this mercenary army of 10,000 men that follow Cyrus the Younger to fight against Artaxerxes II. And there you see these interactions and these fights for power for of these men, but interestingly, the mother Parisatis is mentioned, and also I started to get interested in that and this way of expressing leadership on the different views of the different generals there. And from there, I went on because Ctesias also has views of this battle of Cunaxa between Artaxerxes II and Cyrus the Younger. He was there. He's supposed to be the physician that saved Artaxerxes II. And I started to look into what Ctesias said, and also during my master's, I met Professor Llewellyn Jones, and we got very interested into this topic and into the view of Ctesias and how it's a fresh view and different from the normal ancient Greek sources that we have, also because of this interaction that he has within the court with women, with eunuchs as well, and besides the king and his men.
No, I see. That's a nice pathway in a way. It's interesting because you were focusing on something quite different, but then found interest in the women, in the role of the women as well. Um, and do these women do they appear more strongly because the men are not as powerful, or are they more of a supplementary role in terms of leadership, in your opinion?
Um, it is it differs the vision that we have of these women depending on the sources, because the sources are male focused and they were male writers, and normally they wanted to transmit a certain idea of what the role of a royal woman should be. So we often find testimonies of how cruel they were, or how they were stepping into the role of their son, that is the king, or influencing in a way that they shouldn't influence in at the court. Um, so they did exercise power, but not in a conventional way as we would think. Okay, so they have power because they have political influence, or because they have an economic support, because they have a lot of money to support their cause, or they have a massive army. But when it comes to women, it goes more with influence, with the role within the court, their interactions with their brothers, sons, and so forth. One of the positions that these women could exercise more power and more influence, it was as the mother of the king. And even in research, they have been generally uh, set aside, and the role has normally been said to be that of not really influential, to be there next to the king or next to the brother. But in reality, women and the mothers had a lot of power and a lot of influence when it came to put their son into the throne. In fact, I'm following with this example of Parisatis. She favored Cyrus the Younger, and she was behind the scene to trying to put Cyrus the Younger instead of Artaxerxes. So they had a lot of power, more than we think, but also the image that they have normally in the sources and in research is still quite as cruel or manipulative, kind of like witch-like. Um, it's still something that we come across a lot, and it's not very much studied how they influence the education of their sons, for example, or if they were in fact only in the harem and they did not have any other kind of role besides of that. But in Ctesias, for example, we see how the sisters are sometimes sent into diplomatic missions to finish certain conflicts. So it has to be contrasted, it has to be compared to other sources, of course, but it's quite interesting that they're portrayed in this way.
What a complex story. And thank you so much for going into a bit more detail for me. But it's a very complex and intriguing story because
Thank you.
it's not something that we know about. I mean, I feel that when you think about Egyptian royal women, for example, I feel that story is quite well known, but we don't know much about Achaemenid Persia. So it's
Mm.
great that you're highlighting this story. And to follow up from that, what has been your main surprises or challenges studying Iran and this period in particular?
Hmm. My main surprises have been how still these stereotypes, Western stereotypes of European, let's say, stereotypes of Iranian women and Iranian history in general with Achaemenids. We have this image of the Persians from the film of the 300. So it's very much like that. And you still come across certain examples of stereotypes and how it is quite biased sometimes, the look that we have towards Mesopotamia and Achaemenid Persia and so forth, when they were brilliant administrative wives to hold an empire for such a long time. Um, so connecting to this, for me, it was challenging because I started in my basic formation as an undergrad and during my master's, it was focused on ancient Greece and ancient Greek warfare specifically and leadership. And it has been totally new for me. I had almost to start from scratch to learn um, and to deconstruct certain concepts that I might have as because of this background focusing on ancient Greece. So it's been challenging because I had to start this PhD from scratch but it has been wonderful, wonderful learning experience. And I have learned a lot and it has enhanced as well my view in order to compare this interaction between Greece and Persia and how much Greece owes to Persia and to Iran in general and to its tradition.
Wow, and it's nice that you've been able to sort of cross that barrier as
Mm.
well between studying Greece and going into Persia and in Iran. So it's challenging in itself, but well done for reaching to that challenge. And did you
Thank
have
you.
to learn new language skills as well for that?
I have started small. For
Okay,
now, I'm with Ctesias. That
okay,
he grew, and the sources are in ancient Greek
right,
mainly,
of course,
and
sure, sure, sure.
I studied classical philology, so I studied ancient Greece and Latin, ancient Greek and Latin. And I'm mainly on that, but I'm trying to cross with translations right now. I don't have any grasp on Persian and so forth, although I would love to. I would love to.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for answering these questions, and it's been a really great conversation. But sort of as a way to wrap up, I'm wondering where you'd like to take your PhD after. Are you considering to stay on in academia, or do you have other plans? If you don't mind going into that a little bit.
Yes, no, of course. My plan is to stay in academia. Once I finish my PhD, I plan on staying here in the UK and to look for going forward to other positions and to start maybe a postdoc or something like that. But my goal has always been to stay here. It was first to come to the UK, then to stay in British academia and to keep going here. And I don't know, just let's see where it leads me.
Well, I'm sure you'll find something, and with work as interesting as yours, I'm sure there'll be a good audience for that. But thank you so much, Anna, for talking with me today. I really learned a lot, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as well.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here, and thank you for being interested in my research.